Chapter 1. Andrea's Baby Shower. A story of love with life's challenges, situations, and hurdles, and the ability to overcome them all, produced by Reggae Paul. The late afternoon sun reflected gently across the pool as laughter filled the backyard. Family, friends, co-workers, neighbors, everyone had gathered to celebrate the upcoming arrival of Andrea and Gavin's first child. The baby shower was exactly what Andrea wanted. Relaxed, warm, filled with people she loved. Clusters of guests stood talking throughout the yard while soft music played in the background. Near one side of the pool, a group of women sat together laughing and sharing stories. Across the yard, several men stood near the food tables discussing sports, business, and life. Among them was Stephen Foster. Stephen balanced a paper plate in one hand while half listening to a conversation happening around him. Then he noticed her. At first it was simply a glance, then another, and then he found himself watching quietly. The woman sat comfortably with a group of friends across the pool. She looked as though she had come directly from a board meeting. A tailored pantsuit, a light pink blouse, natural hair worn loose and effortlessly attractive. Nothing flashy, nothing exaggerated, and just confidence, grace, and ease. What caught Stephen's attention wasn't her appearance alone. It was her presence. She seemed completely relaxed, attentive to every conversation around her, quick to laugh, genuinely happy. There was something refreshing about her, something different. Stephen found himself intrigued. She was unlike any woman he had noticed in a very long time. Earth to Stephen. The voice pulled him back immediately. Stephen blinked. What? Marcus laughed. Standing beside him, Marcus had followed Stephen's line of sight all the way across the pool. Nice choice. Stephen shook his head. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't. Marcus laughed. The two men continued talking while Stephen unsuccessfully tried to appear uninterested. Unfortunately, someone else had noticed. Carla. From her seat across the pool, Carla caught Stephen looking in Vanessa's direction. A mischievous smile immediately appeared. She leaned toward the women beside her. Someone has an admirer. The group followed her gaze. Vanessa looked confused. What are you talking about? Carla nodded toward Stephen. Food table. Vanessa glanced over, only briefly, then immediately looked away. Stop. I'm serious. No, you're not. I absolutely am. Vanessa shook her head and returned to the conversation. Unfortunately, Carla was not finished. A few minutes later, she stood up. Vanessa. What? We need fruit. Vanessa narrowed her eyes. No, we don't. Yes, we do. No. Yes. The other women immediately joined in. We definitely need fruit. And drinks. Vanessa looked around suspiciously. You people are ridiculous. Carla smiled. We know. Vanessa laughed and stood. Picking up an empty serving tray, she headed toward the refreshment table. Carla watched her leave and smiled proudly. The trap had been set. Meanwhile, Marcus noticed Vanessa approaching. His grin immediately widened. Oh, this is getting interesting. Stephen sighed. I already regret standing here. No, you don't. No, I really don't. Marcus laughed. As Vanessa reached the table, Marcus immediately stepped forward. Vanessa, she stopped. Marcus, it's been a while. It has. The two exchanged a quick hug. Then Marcus turned dramatically toward Stephen. Have you two met? Vanessa looked at Stephen. Stephen looked at Vanessa, and for a brief moment, both forgot whatever they had planned to say. Marcus noticed immediately, which only made him happier. Vanessa Clark, he pointed. Stephen Foster. The introductions complete, Marcus stepped back as though his work was done, which, in his mind, it absolutely was. Nice to meet you. Stephen offered his hand. Vanessa smiled. You too. The handshake lasted only a second, yet somehow both noticed it. An awkward silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just unexpected. Vanessa recovered first. So what exactly did Marcus tell you about me? Marcus immediately laughed. Stephen looked at him, then back at Vanessa. I feel like that's a dangerous question. It probably is. Vanessa nodded. Marcus has been a troublemaker for as long as I've known him. I heard that. Marcus called from nearby. Good. Vanessa called back. The laughter came easily. Stephen found himself relaxing. So you've known him a long time? Since school. Vanessa shook her head. Which explains a lot. That bad? Worse. Stephen laughed. I suddenly feel like I'm missing important information. You are. Don't listen to her, Marcus protested. She's trying to ruin my reputation. Vanessa smiled. You had a reputation? Marcus clutched his chest dramatically. That was hurtful. The three laughed together. For the next several minutes, the conversation flowed naturally. Work, friends, queens, family, and nothing particularly important. Yet neither Stephen nor Vanessa seemed eager to leave. Eventually, Vanessa remembered why she had come to the table in the first place. She lifted the tray. Oh, right. What? The fruit. Stephen laughed. The fruit? The very suspicious fruit. Now even Marcus couldn't stop laughing. Vanessa shook her head. I am surrounded by terrible people. That's been said before, Stephen replied. Vanessa looked at him, then smiled. You know what? What? So I've been told. The smile they shared lingered a moment longer than either expected. And although neither realized it at the time, something important had begun. What started as a simple introduction at a baby shower would soon become one of the most important relationships of their lives. But neither Stephen nor Vanessa knew that yet. They only knew that for some reason. They were both hoping the conversation would continue. Chapter 2. The walk to her car. The rest of the evening seemed to move faster after that. Vanessa eventually returned to her friends with the tray of fruit and drinks, but she did not return as quickly as Carla expected, which told Carla everything she needed to know. From across the pool, Carla watched Vanessa trying to pretend nothing had happened. She knew better. Andrea noticed too. So? Vanessa sat down. So what? Carla smiled. The fruit took a long time. Vanessa placed the tray in the center of the table. Fruit requires care. Andrea laughed. Is that what we're calling it? Vanessa shook her head. You people are impossible. Maybe. Carla reached for a drink. But you were smiling. I smile all the time. Not like that. Vanessa looked away, but her smile betrayed her. Across the yard, Marcus was giving Stephen a similar look. So? Stephen sighed. Not you too. What? That face. Marcus laughed. What face? The face that says you're about to start trouble. Marcus placed a hand over his chest. I am offended. You should be. All I'm saying is you seem to enjoy the conversation. Stephen tried to focus on his plate. She's nice. Nice? Marcus repeated the word as though it disappointed him. That's all you have? Stephen looked across the pool. Vanessa was laughing with her friends again. Relaxed, effortless, beautiful without trying to be. Stephen smiled despite himself. Marcus noticed immediately. Stephen turned back. Don't. I didn't say anything. You don't have to. Marcus laughed. Man, you are in trouble. Stephen shook his head, but he did not deny it. As evening settled over the backyard, the baby shower moved into its final stretch. Andrea and Gavin gathered everyone together near the pool. The music lowered. Conversations softened. Andrea stood beside her husband with one hand resting against her stomach. For the first time that evening, the laughter quieted into something tender. Thank you all for coming, Andrea said. Her voice trembled slightly. Gavin placed a hand gently on her back. Andrea smiled and continued. We feel so blessed to have this kind of love around us. This baby is already surrounded by family, friends, aunties, uncles, and probably too many people ready to spoil him. Everyone laughed. A short prayer followed, then hugs, pictures, final plates of food, goodbyes that took much longer than necessary. Slowly, the celebration began to end. Guests gathered purses, jackets, containers of leftovers, and gift bags. Vanessa hugged Andrea carefully. "You did too much today." Andrea laughed. "I'm pregnant. I supervised." "You still did too much." "I know." They hugged again. Carla appeared beside them. "Call me when you get home." Vanessa smiled. "Yes, Mother." Carla pointed at her. "Don't play with me." "I won't." As Vanessa turned to leave, she saw Stephen approaching. He looked calm, but there was something hesitant in his expression, as though he had decided to say something before he talked himself out of it. "Heading out?" Vanessa smiled. "Looks that way." Stephen nodded toward the parking area. "Let me walk you to your car." Carla, who was still close enough to hear, immediately looked away. Too quickly, Vanessa noticed. Of course she noticed, but she chose not to give her friends the satisfaction. "Sure," Stephen smiled. Together they walked away from the noise of the baby shower. For the first time all evening they were alone. Not completely alone. There were still people moving around behind them, still voices, still laughter, still music. But somehow the space between them felt separate from everything else. Vanessa adjusted the strap of her purse. "So," Stephen glanced at her. "So," she smiled. "Did Marcus put you up to this?" Stephen laughed. "Walking you to your car?" "Yes." "No." "Are you sure?" "Pretty sure." "That doesn't sound convincing." Stephen smiled. "Marcus encourages many bad ideas, but this one was mine." Vanessa laughed softly. "Good to know." They walked a few steps in comfortable silence. Then Stephen asked, "Did they fuss with you a little?" Vanessa stopped and looked at him. "A little?" Stephen immediately laughed. "A little? My friends are unbearable." "I believe that." "No, you don't understand." Vanessa pointed back toward the party. "Carla sees one man look in my direction and suddenly I'm being sent on a mission for fruit and drinks." Stephen laughed harder. "So that was intentional." "Of course it was intentional." "I wondered." "You wondered." "I suspected." Vanessa shook her head. "You were part of the setup." "I was standing peacefully near the food." "Looking suspiciously across the pool." Stephen opened his mouth, then closed it. Vanessa smiled. "Exactly." He laughed. "Fair." They continued walking. The evening air had cooled. The city sounds beyond the condo complex felt distant. For a while, neither said anything. Then Vanessa sighed. "It's been a long day." "I can imagine. I need some serious sleep time." Stephen smiled. "I actually slept part of the afternoon." "You did?" "I had driven back earlier and was exhausted." "That sounds responsible." "It was survival." Vanessa laughed. They reached her car a few moments later. She stopped beside the driver's door and turned to face him. "Well, here I am." Stephen nodded. "Here you are." Neither moved. The moment stretched, not awkwardly, not exactly, but noticeably. Vanessa studied him for a second. He looked as if he wanted to say something. "What?" Stephen blinked. "What?" "You're thinking about something." "No." "Yes, you are." He laughed under his breath. "It's nothing." "Oh, no." Vanessa folded her arms. "Do tell." Stephen looked away for a moment, then back at her. "I probably shouldn't." "Which means you definitely should." He smiled. "You promise not to laugh?" "No." Stephen laughed. "At least you're honest." Vanessa waited. Finally, he exhaled. "I feel like a teenager crushing on the new girl." For 1 second, Vanessa simply stared at him. Then she laughed. Not cruelly, not mockingly, honestly, completely caught off guard. "Really?" Stephen immediately looked embarrassed. "Forget I said that." "Oh, no." Vanessa shook her head. "You do not get to take that back." "I was afraid of that." She laughed again, then softened. The humor faded into something quieter, something more thoughtful. Stephen noticed. "You okay?" Vanessa looked down briefly, then back up at him. "Yes." A pause, then she smiled. "And I feel like I have a lot to process." Stephen's expression changed. He had not expected that. Neither had she. For a moment, neither spoke. The words hung between them. Simple, gentle, honest, a little frightening. Finally, Vanessa reached for her car door. "I should go." Stephen nodded. "Of course." She opened the door, then paused. "Stephen?" "Yes? It was nice meeting you." He smiled. "It was nice meeting you too, Vanessa." She got into the car and started the engine. Before pulling away, she lowered the window. "Good night." "Good night." Stephen stepped back as she drove away. He remained there until her taillights disappeared from view. Then he stood a moment longer, smiling to himself. Across the road, Vanessa glanced once in her rearview mirror. He was still there, watching. She smiled too. By the time she turned the corner, both of them were thinking the same thing. Whatever had started that evening, it did not feel finished. Chapter 3: The Entrepreneur Meetup. The week following Andrea's baby shower felt unusually long. Not because either Stephen or Vanessa had become obsessed. At least that was what they told themselves. Still, both found their thoughts drifting back to the same evening more often than they cared to admit. Stephen threw himself into work. Vanessa focused on meetings, deadlines, and projects. Life continued. Yet every now and then a smile would appear unexpectedly. A memory, a joke, a conversation, a moment. And then it would disappear just as quickly. On Thursday afternoon, Marcus called Stephen. "What are you doing Friday night?" "Working." Marcus sighed dramatically. "You always say that." "Because it's usually true." "Well, cancel it." Stephen laughed. "Why?" "The entrepreneur meetup." "No." "Yes." "No." Marcus smiled to himself, then delivered the only argument he needed. "Vanessa will be there." A pause. Stephen leaned back in his office chair. "You know, one day somebody is going to punch you." Marcus burst out laughing. "So that's a yes?" Stephen shook his head despite the fact Marcus couldn't see him. "What time?" "I knew it." "Marcus, 7 o'clock." The line disconnected moments later. Stephen stared at the phone and laughed. The man was impossible, yet somehow he found himself looking forward to Friday evening. The entrepreneur meetup was being held at a business center in Queens. Nearly 100 people filled the conference room. Business owners, managers, investors, young entrepreneurs, college students, people with dreams, people with plans, people looking for guidance. Stephen entered with Marcus and immediately began scanning the room. Marcus noticed. "You know she's working, right?" Stephen gave him a look. Marcus laughed. "Just checking." Then Stephen saw her. Vanessa stood near the front of the room speaking with several attendees. She looked different than she had at the baby shower. More focused, more professional, more confident. She greeted people warmly while somehow maintaining complete control of the room. It was impressive. Stephen found himself smiling. Before long, the program began. Several speakers took the stage. Business owners shared experiences. Entrepreneurs discussed challenges. Investors talked about opportunities. Then Vanessa stepped to the microphone. The room immediately quieted. She smiled at the audience. "Good evening, everyone." The crowd responded warmly. "Before we continue, I'd like to spend a few minutes discussing something I think doesn't get enough attention." Several people opened notebooks. Others prepared their phones. Vanessa paused. The space between learning and implementation. The room became noticeably quieter. "We live in an age where information is everywhere." She slowly walked across the stage. Books, podcasts, courses, seminars, videos, certifications. Heads nodded throughout the audience. Most people aren't suffering from a lack of information. A few people laughed. "It's true," Vanessa smiled. "The challenge isn't learning something. The challenge is applying what you've learned in real life." Stephen found himself leaning forward. Vanessa continued. "Many people gain knowledge on Monday and expect results by Friday." The room erupted in laughter. When the laughter settled, she continued. "And when results don't appear immediately, they assume the information doesn't work." She shook her head. "Usually that's not the problem." The audience listened carefully. The problem is that experience hasn't caught up to knowledge yet. The room became completely silent. Even Marcus stopped joking. You have to allow yourself time to become the person capable of successfully applying what you've learned. Stephen watched several young entrepreneurs rapidly take notes. Vanessa's voice softened. Progress is often happening before results become visible. Several people nodded. Don't quit simply because your growth hasn't become obvious yet. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Stephen joined in, not because she sounded intelligent. Many people sounded intelligent. What impressed him was her passion. She genuinely cared. That was difficult to fake. After the presentation, Vanessa opened the floor for questions. Hands immediately shot into the air. The first question came from a young man in the back. What if you've been trying for years and nothing seems to be working? Vanessa smiled. Years doing what? The room laughed. The young man laughed too. No, seriously, Vanessa continued. Activity and progress are not always the same thing. For several minutes, she helped him identify weaknesses in his approach while encouraging him not to give up. Another attendee asked about balancing a full-time job while building a business. Vanessa shared practical advice. Then came questions about leadership, marketing, financing, growth, time management. For nearly an hour, she answered questions. Never rushed, never dismissive, never making anyone feel foolish. Stephen noticed something remarkable. The younger attendees trusted her, not because she had all the answers, because she genuinely wanted them to succeed. By the time the session ended, a line had formed. Young entrepreneurs waited patiently to thank her, ask follow-up questions, seek advice, request mentorship. Vanessa greeted every person with the same patience and enthusiasm. Marcus nudged Stephen. So? Stephen kept watching. So what? Marcus laughed. What do you think? Stephen smiled. For a moment, he said nothing, then finally answered. I thought she was beautiful. Marcus grinned. And now? Stephen's eyes drifted back toward Vanessa. She was listening carefully to a young entrepreneur who was nervously explaining a business idea. She wasn't checking the time. She wasn't looking for an exit. She was fully present, fully invested. Stephen smiled. Now I'm impressed. Marcus stopped smiling for a moment because he recognized something in Stephen's voice. This wasn't simple attraction anymore. Stephen wasn't just interested. He was becoming invested. And whether either of them realized it or not, that changed everything. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Vanessa finally looked up from a conversation and spotted Stephen standing across the room. Their eyes met. A smile immediately appeared on her face. A genuine one, the kind that arrives before you realize it. Stephen smiled too, and for reasons neither fully understood, seeing each other felt surprisingly good. The evening wasn't over yet. In fact, it was about to become one of their favorite memories. But neither of them knew that. Not yet. Chapter 4. Coffee, Conversation, and Closing Time. The final attendees lingered long after the entrepreneur meetup officially ended. Small groups remained scattered throughout the room. Business cards were exchanged. Phone numbers were shared. Last-minute questions were asked. The energy of the evening refused to disappear. Vanessa finally finished speaking with the last young entrepreneur in line. The young woman thanked her once more before heading toward the exit. For the first time in nearly 3 hours, Vanessa exhaled. Stephen noticed immediately. You look exhausted. Vanessa laughed softly. I am exhausted. Stephen smiled. You hit it well. Occupational hazard. She gathered a few papers and placed them into her bag. Stephen watched her for a moment. The confident speaker from the stage was still there. But now he saw something else. The effort, the responsibility, the emotional energy she poured into helping people. It explained why she looked so tired. Vanessa noticed him watching. What? Nothing. That's never true. Stephen laughed. I was just thinking. Dangerous. Apparently. Vanessa smiled. For a moment they stood quietly. Then she glanced toward the exit. You know, Stephen waited. Whenever I do one of these events, I usually need a little time to unwind afterward. Stephen nodded. I can understand that. Vanessa tilted her head slightly. Want to help? Stephen blinked. Help? She laughed. There's a cafe a few blocks away. A brief pause. Then Stephen smiled. I'd like that. The cafe was warm, comfortable, quiet. A welcome contrast to the noise and activity of the meetup. Soft music played in the background. Only a handful of customers occupied the tables. Vanessa immediately looked more relaxed. They ordered coffee, tea, pastries, and a few snacks before finding a table near the window. For a few moments, neither spoke, both enjoying the change of pace. Then Vanessa smiled. Thank you for coming tonight. Stephen shrugged. It wasn't difficult. Vanessa narrowed her eyes. Marcus told me he practically dragged you there. Stephen sighed. I really need better friends. Vanessa laughed. No argument there. They shared a smile. Then Vanessa leaned forward slightly. So tell me. What? What did you like most about the meetup? Stephen answered immediately. You. Vanessa laughed so hard she nearly spilled her drink. That is not a real answer. It is absolutely a real answer. No. Yes. No. Stephen smiled. Fine. Vanessa waited. This time he thought about it. Carefully. The thing that impressed me wasn't the information. Her expression softened. What was it? You. Vanessa pointed at him. That answer still doesn't count. Stephen laughed. No, hear me out. She settled back, listening. You genuinely care. The smile slowly faded from her face, not because she disliked the answer, because she wasn't expecting it. Stephen continued. You care whether those people succeed. You care whether they understand. You care whether they leave better than they arrived. The cafe suddenly felt quieter. I've met people who enjoy being seen as knowledgeable. Vanessa listened, but tonight felt different. He paused. You weren't trying to impress anyone. You were trying to help. For several moments, Vanessa said nothing. Then she looked down at her cup. A small smile appeared. Thank you. The sincerity in her voice surprised him. No problem. It means more than you know. Stephen nodded. Somehow he believed her. The conversation continued naturally after that. Business, family, childhood, Queens, Jamaica, goals, mistakes, dreams, successes, failures, topics shifted without effort. One story led to another. One memory unlocked the next. The hours disappeared. At one point, Vanessa laughed so hard she had tears in her eyes. A few minutes later, Stephen was laughing just as hard. Neither could remember exactly what had started it, only that it felt good. Easy, comfortable, as though they had known each other far longer than a few weeks. Eventually, the cafe began emptying. Employees started wiping down tables. Chairs were quietly stacked. The owner glanced at the clock. Vanessa followed his gaze, then checked her phone. Her eyes widened. Oh, wow. Stephen looked over. What? It's late. He checked the time. She was right. Neither had noticed. Vanessa laughed. How did that happen? Stephen smiled. I think we got distracted. A little. A lot. They both laughed. Then the reality of the evening finally arrived. It was time to leave. Neither seemed particularly excited about that fact. The check arrived. Stephen reached for it immediately. Vanessa noticed. Stephen, what? You don't have to do that. I know. Then why are you? He smiled. Because I want to. Vanessa considered arguing, then decided not to. Thank you. You're welcome. They gathered their things and stood, neither moving toward the door quite yet. Vanessa smiled. I should get home. Probably. I've got work in the morning. Responsible. Very. Stephen laughed. Then Vanessa hesitated, just briefly, before saying, Let me get home and settled. Stephen looked at her. Okay. A small smile appeared. I'll call you later. A pause. Then, Is that okay? Stephen smiled, more than she realized. More than okay. The smile she gave him in return stayed with him long after they left the cafe. Outside, they walked together toward the parking lot, neither in a hurry, neither eager for the evening to end, but eventually it did. Goodbyes were exchanged, cars started, headlights illuminated the night, and both drove home carrying the same unexpected realization. The meetup had been memorable. The cafe had been enjoyable, but neither of those things explained what they were feeling. The truth was much simpler. They had discovered they genuinely enjoyed being together, and that realization would soon change everything. Chapter 5. The Phone Call. Vanessa arrived home just before 10. The moment she stepped through her apartment door, she kicked off her shoes and let out a long breath. The evening had been wonderful, exhausting, unexpected, and somehow far more meaningful than she intended. She placed her purse on the kitchen counter and headed toward her bedroom. A few minutes later, she had changed into comfortable clothes and settled onto her couch. The apartment was quiet, peaceful. For the first time all day, she had nothing demanding her attention. No meetings, no presentations, no responsibilities, just silence and her thoughts. Unfortunately, her thoughts seemed determined to focus on one particular person, Stephen Foster. The smile arrived before she could stop it. She shook her head. "You are ridiculous." The smile remained. Across town, Stephen had just finished straightening up his apartment. The television was on. A basketball game played quietly in the background. For the first time all evening, he finally sat down. He reached for the remote. Then his phone rang. Stephen glanced at the screen. His heart immediately jumped. Vanessa. A smile spread across his face. His pulse rose. He laughed softly at himself, then answered, "Hey, hey." The familiar warmth in her voice immediately made him smile. "Did you make it home okay?" "I did. You?" "Just got settled." A brief pause followed. Neither seemed particularly interested in ending the conversation. Finally, Vanessa laughed. "I feel like we forgot to leave the cafe." Stephen laughed. "I was thinking the same thing." And just like that, the conversation began again. At first, they talked about the meetup, funny moments, interesting questions, people they had met, business ideas, future plans. Then the conversation expanded, the way good conversations often do. One topic led naturally to another. Childhood memories. The conversation drifted naturally into embarrassing childhood stories. Stephen should have known better than to volunteer one. "You have to promise not to laugh." Vanessa immediately laughed. "That doesn't sound promising." "See, that's exactly why I shouldn't tell this story." "Now you definitely have to." Stephen sighed dramatically. "I was about 13. "Oh, this is already good." "It is not." "Yes, it is." He shook his head and continued. "There was this girl I liked." Vanessa smiled. "Of course there was. And for reasons I still can't explain, I thought climbing a mango tree would impress her." Vanessa burst out laughing. "Why?" "I was 13. Logic was not involved." That only made her laugh harder. Stephen continued. "So I climbed higher and higher. And then I realized I couldn't get down." Vanessa nearly dropped the phone laughing. "No. Yes. You got stuck in a tree?" "For almost an hour." By now, Vanessa could barely speak. "What happened?" "My mother came looking for me." "No." "Yes." "And the girl?" Stephen groaned. "She watched the entire rescue." Vanessa laughed so hard tears filled her eyes. "That is terrible. It was one of the worst days of my life." "It is one of the best stories I've ever heard." Stephen couldn't help laughing, too. School experiences, favorite foods, embarrassing moments, family traditions, travel stories, dreams they had never shared with many people. Every answer seemed to create another question. Every story unlocked another memory. Time disappeared. More than once, Vanessa glanced at the clock and realized another 30 minutes had passed. Neither mentioned it. Neither seemed concerned. Eventually, Stephen found himself laughing so hard he could barely speak. Vanessa wasn't doing much better. "What happened next?" Stephen asked. Oh no. Vanessa immediately started laughing again. You can't tell this story without finishing it. I absolutely can. You cannot. Watch me. No. Yes. The laughter continued. Neither could remember the last time a conversation felt this effortless. There was no pressure, no performance, no pretending, just honesty, comfort, and connection. An hour passed, then another. At one point, Vanessa said, I should probably let you go. Stephen nodded. That's probably a good idea. Neither hung up. Instead, another topic appeared. Then another, then another. Eventually, Stephen laughed. We're terrible at ending conversations. Vanessa smiled. Apparently. The strange thing was that neither wanted to end it. Both recognized that. Neither said it. As the night grew later, the energy of the conversation began changing. The laughter remained, but it became softer. The pauses became longer. The discussion became more personal, more reflective, and more comfortable. Vanessa curled up beneath a blanket on her couch. Stephen stretched out across his bed. The television had long since been forgotten. Neither remembered it was still on. For a while, they simply talked about life. Not major accomplishments, not career goals, life. The ordinary moments, the meaningful moments, the moments that quietly shape a person. Stephen found himself sharing stories he normally kept private. Vanessa did the same. The trust developing between them felt natural, unforced, as though it had been growing for much longer than a few weeks. Eventually, Stephen noticed something. Vanessa had become quieter, not distant, just quieter. At first, he assumed she was thinking. Then he noticed something else, her breathing. It had changed. The rhythm was slower now, more relaxed. Several seconds passed, then a minute. Stephen smiled. She had fallen asleep. The realization was unexpectedly touching. There was something deeply trusting about it, something honest. She hadn't planned it, hadn't meant to do it. She had simply become comfortable enough to drift off while listening to his voice. For several moments, Stephen remained on the line, listening, not speaking, not moving, just listening. A small smile appeared. Then he whispered softly, "Good night, Vanessa." He ended the call gently. The room suddenly felt quieter, but somehow not empty. Stephen placed the phone on his nightstand and stared at the ceiling. The smile remained. For a long moment, he thought about the evening. The meetup, the cafe, the conversation, the laughter, and finally the woman who had somehow occupied every one of those memories. Then a realization settled quietly over him. Vanessa Clark had become the best part of his day. The thought should have concerned him. Instead, it made him smile. Across town, Vanessa slept peacefully, completely unaware that she had fallen asleep on the phone, completely unaware of Stephen's final words, and completely unaware that she was beginning to feel exactly the same way. For now, neither of them had the language to describe what was happening. They only knew that somehow life seemed a little brighter whenever the other person was in it. Chapter 6. Lunch with Mom June. The following Sunday arrived with clear skies and warm weather. Vanessa had promised her mother lunch. It was a tradition they had maintained for years. No matter how busy life became, they found time to sit down together, catch up, and remind each other that family came first. Their favorite restaurant wasn't fancy. It didn't need to be. The food was good, the service was familiar, and after years of visiting, the staff greeted them by name. Vanessa arrived a few minutes early. Mom June arrived exactly on time, as always. The two hugged and settled into their usual booth near the window. Menus were opened, drinks were ordered, and for several minutes the conversation stayed comfortably ordinary. Work, family, Andrea's pregnancy, the baby shower, the usual topics. Then Mom June lowered her menu and looked directly at her daughter. "So," Vanessa immediately recognized that tone. "Oh no. What? I know that look." Mom June smiled. "What look?" "The look you get when you've already decided to ask something." Mom June laughed. "Fine." Vanessa sighed dramatically. "Here we go." Mom June folded her hands. "Who is Stephen?" Vanessa nearly dropped her menu. "What? Stephen?" How do you know about Stephen? Mom June stared at her. Vanessa. What? You've mentioned his name at least 6 times in the last 20 minutes. No, I haven't. You have. No. You absolutely have. Vanessa shook her head. Mom June laughed. Oh, sweetheart. The server arrived with drinks, temporarily interrupting the conversation. Vanessa silently thanked him. Fortunately, he quickly left. Mom June smiled again. So tell me about him. Vanessa tried to act casual. He's a friend. Mm-hmm. He is. Of course. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Mom June waited patiently. Finally, Vanessa surrendered. He's Jamaican. Okay. He owns a transportation company. Okay. He's hardworking. Good. Smart. Excellent. Family-oriented. Mom June raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Vanessa immediately realized she had become enthusiastic. Don't do that. Do what? The eyebrow thing. Mom June laughed. I haven't done anything. You know exactly what you're doing. For the next several minutes, Vanessa talked about the baby shower, about the entrepreneur meetup, about the cafe, about the late-night phone call, about how easy it was to talk to him, about how he always listened, about how he remembered details, about how he never made conversations about himself. Mom June listened quietly, occasionally smiling, occasionally nodding, mostly observing. Eventually, their meals arrived. For a few minutes, both focused on eating. Then Mom June asked a question Vanessa wasn't prepared for. How does he make you feel? Vanessa paused. Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. What? Stephen. Mom June smiled softly. How does he make you feel? Vanessa looked down at her plate. The answer came quicker than expected. Comfortable. Mom June nodded. Anything else? Vanessa thought carefully. Then another word appeared. Safe. The word surprised even her. She hadn't planned to say it. Yet it felt true. Mom June's expression softened. That's important. Vanessa nodded. It is. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Mom June leaned forward slightly. You know something? What? I haven't heard you talk about a man this way before. Vanessa laughed. That's not true. It is. Mom June smiled. Most of the men you've dated impressed you at first. Vanessa couldn't argue. Good jobs. True. Nice clothes. Also true. Smooth talkers. Vanessa laughed. Definitely true. But eventually something was always missing. The laughter faded. Vanessa slowly nodded. She knew exactly what her mother meant. Something had always been missing. Consistency, character, purpose, trust, something. Mom June reached across the table and touched her hand. I raised you to recognize substance. Vanessa listened. Not charm, not appearances, not potential. Mom June smiled. Substance. The word settled deeply. For a long moment, Vanessa said nothing. She found herself thinking about Stephen, the way he treated people, the way he spoke about responsibility, the way he encouraged others, the way he listened, the way he carried himself. And suddenly a realization appeared. Quietly. Naturally. Not because her mother suggested it, because she already knew it. Her mother had simply helped her recognize it. A small smile appeared on Vanessa's face. Mom June noticed immediately. What are you smiling about? Vanessa looked out the window, thinking, reflecting. Then finally she looked back at her mother. I think... She stopped. Mom June waited patiently. I think Stephen might be the kind of man I could build a good life with. Silence. Then a smile spread across Mom June's face. Now that's a very different statement from he's just a friend. Vanessa laughed. Maybe. No. Mom June shook her head. Definitely. The conversation moved on. Work, families, the baby, future plans, life. But the thought remained. Long after lunch ended, long after she hugged her mother goodbye, long after she returned home. For the first time in years, Vanessa found herself imagining a future. Not a fantasy, not a dream, a real future. One built on partnership, trust, family, and strangely enough, every version of that future seemed to include Stephen Foster. The realization should have frightened her. Instead, it made her smile. Chapter 7: Chinese Food and Uncomfortable Truths. A few days after lunch with Mom June, Vanessa found herself thinking about Stephen more than usual. Not obsessively, not constantly, but often enough to notice. The problem wasn't that she was developing feelings. The problem was that she was beginning to imagine possibilities. And that made her nervous. Whenever life started feeling serious, Vanessa had learned to seek advice from people she trusted, which was exactly why she called Andrea. By Saturday afternoon, they were shopping together for the baby's room. Paint samples, crib accessories, tiny clothes that somehow cost more than adult clothing. The usual chaos. Andrea was enjoying every minute of it. Vanessa was pretending not to. Neither woman was convincing. Several hours later, they loaded their purchases into Andrea's vehicle, both exhausted, both hungry, and neither interested in cooking. "Chinese?" Andrea asked. Vanessa nodded immediately. "Chinese." The decision required no further discussion. A short time later, they were sitting comfortably in Andrea's living room, surrounded by takeout containers. The smell of fried rice, sesame chicken, and lo mein filled the air. For several minutes, the conversation remained light. Baby names, nursery decorations, work, friends, life. Then Andrea casually asked, "So how's Stephen?" Vanessa immediately narrowed her eyes. "That sounded suspicious." Andrea laughed. "It was a question." "It was not." "It was." "It absolutely was not." Andrea smiled. Vanessa pointed at her. "See?" "What?" "That smile." "What smile?" "The smile that says you're fishing." Andrea laughed. "Fine." Vanessa shook her head. "You are impossible." "So I've been told." The familiar phrase made both women laugh. Eventually, Vanessa relaxed, and before she realized what she was doing, she started talking. About Stephen. Again. Andrea listened quietly. The entrepreneur meetup, the cafe, the phone call, the way conversations with him felt easy, the way he listened, the way he remembered details, the way he made her laugh. Andrea smiled, because she had noticed something important. Vanessa wasn't talking about Stephen like someone describing a casual friend. She was talking about him like someone trying to understand why he mattered. Eventually, Andrea interrupted. "You like him?" Vanessa froze. "No." Andrea stared. "Vanessa." "What?" "You absolutely like him." Vanessa looked away. Andrea laughed. "Oh, wow." "What?" "You really do." Vanessa groaned. "This is why I don't tell you things." Andrea smiled. "No. This is exactly why you tell me things." Both laughed. Then the room grew quieter. Andrea hesitated. The change was subtle, but Vanessa noticed immediately. "What?" Andrea looked down at her food. "Nothing." "Andrea." A pause, then another. Finally, Andrea sighed. "There is something I should probably tell you." Vanessa sat up slightly. "What?" Andrea suddenly looked uncomfortable, which was unusual. Andrea was rarely uncomfortable. That alone got Vanessa's attention. "Did Stephen tell you about his mother?" Vanessa paused. "She was mentioned a few times." Andrea nodded. "Why?" Andrea took a slow breath. "Stephen's aunt passed away a few months ago." The room became still. Vanessa listened carefully. "He and his mother were very close to her," Andrea continued. "They practically grew up together. When she died, his mother took it really hard." Vanessa nodded slowly. That explained some things, but not Andrea's expression. "Okay." Andrea looked away briefly, then back. "Since then, Stephen has been thinking more seriously about bringing his mother to the United States." Vanessa nodded again, still waiting, still sensing more. Andrea saw it and hesitated. "Andrea." "I know." "What aren't you saying?" Andrea sighed heavily, then placed her container down. "Honestly," she shook her head, "this feels awkward." Vanessa stared. "Andrea." I really think Stephen should be the one to tell you. What? Andrea rubbed her forehead, then finally said it. 6 months ago, the words hung in the air. After some of the grieving had passed. Andrea paused again. Vanessa's stomach tightened. I told Stephen something. What? Andrea exhaled, slowly, carefully, then looked directly at her friend. I told him maybe he should stop waiting for Miss Wright. Silence. Vanessa didn't move, didn't speak, didn't blink. Andrea continued. I told him maybe instead of waiting for romance, she swallowed, he should find and hire Miss Help. The room seemed to shrink. Vanessa stared, trying to understand, trying to process. Andrea forced herself to continue. Marry. Get his citizenship. Bring his mother. Silence. Complete silence. The kind that arrives when a conversation suddenly becomes something else entirely. Vanessa slowly placed her fork down. Neither woman spoke. Several seconds passed, then more. Andrea finally broke first. Vanessa? Nothing. Please say something. Vanessa looked at her. Her expression wasn't angry, or hurt, or shocked. Not exactly. It was something more complicated. Something still forming. Finally, she spoke, quietly, carefully. That's a really big bomb. Andrea winced, then nodded. Bang! Despite everything, Vanessa almost laughed. Almost. The moment quickly passed. Andrea leaned forward. Look! Vanessa listened. Please let this take its natural course. Andrea's voice softened. Don't assume anything. I don't know what Stephen is thinking now. I don't know what he wants. And honestly, she shook her head. I don't think 6 months ago and today are the same thing. Vanessa remained silent. The words settled heavily between them. Eventually, the conversation moved elsewhere, or at least tried to. Baby names, furniture, television, anything. Neither woman was fully present anymore. The evening eventually ended. Hugs were exchanged. Promises to talk soon were made. Then Vanessa drove home, alone. The city lights blurred beyond her windshield, her thoughts louder than the traffic around her. By the time she reached her apartment, she felt emotionally exhausted. Not because she had answers, because she suddenly had questions. Questions she had never considered before. Questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. Later that night, her phone lit up. Stephen's name appeared on the screen. For several seconds, she simply stared at it, then placed the phone face down. Not because she was angry, not because she wanted distance. She simply wasn't ready. A few minutes later, she picked up the phone, opened a message, and typed, Hope you had a good evening. Sleep well. She stared at the screen, then pressed send. Across town, Stephen smiled when he received it. Completely unaware of the storm Andrea had unintentionally placed in motion. Meanwhile, Vanessa placed her phone on the nightstand and turned off the light. Sleep did not come easily, and as she lay there staring into the darkness, she found herself wondering whether the feelings growing between them were as simple as she had confidently believed. Chapter 8. Something has changed. Stephen smiled when he received Vanessa's text. It was simple, short, almost unusually formal. Hope you had a good evening. Sleep well. He read it twice, then smiled. Normally, she would have called, or at least sent something longer. Still, he didn't think much about it. Everyone had busy days. Everyone needed time to themselves occasionally. He replied, Sleep well, too. A few minutes later, he placed the phone on the nightstand and went to sleep, completely unaware that Vanessa had spent the evening questioning things she had never questioned before. The next morning arrived with its usual demands: work, meetings, phone calls, schedules. Yet throughout the day, Stephen found himself checking his phone more often than normal. No messages, no random joke from Vanessa, no funny observation, no story about something ridiculous that happened at work. Nothing. By lunchtime, he noticed. By evening, he was certain something was different. Not dramatically different, just enough. Enough for him to feel it. When Vanessa finally responded later that evening, her message was friendly, warm, polite, yet somehow distant. The difference was subtle. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Stephen did. The following 2 days continued much the same way. They spoke, but not for long. They texted, but less often. Every conversation felt as though Vanessa was holding something back. And for the first time since they met, Stephen found himself uneasy. Thursday evening, Marcus stopped by Stephen's office. One look at him and immediately laughed. "What happened to you?" Stephen looked up from his desk. "What are you talking about? You look miserable." "I'm working." "No," Marcus pointed. "That's your confused face." Stephen leaned back. Marcus was annoyingly observant. After years of friendship, hiding things from him was almost impossible. "Vanessa seems different." Marcus immediately smiled. "Oh," Stephen groaned. "Can you not?" "No." Marcus sat down. "Tell me everything." "There isn't much to tell." Marcus waited. Stephen sighed. "She's just different?" "Yeah." Marcus nodded. "Have you asked her?" "No." "Why not?" Stephen looked away, because he already knew the answer. He was afraid of hearing something he didn't want to hear. Marcus noticed immediately. "You like her." Stephen laughed. "What gave it away?" Marcus pointed dramatically. "The fact that you're sitting here analyzing text messages like they're government documents." Even Stephen laughed. Unfortunately, Marcus wasn't wrong. The laughter faded. Then Marcus became serious. "For what it's worth?" Stephen looked up. "I've never seen you this interested in someone." The room became quiet, because that part was true, painfully true. After Marcus left, Stephen sat alone in his office, thinking, reflecting, wondering, and eventually admitting something to himself. He missed her. Not the conversations, not the texts, not the attention. Her. And that realization made the distance feel even larger. Meanwhile, Vanessa wasn't having an easier time. The more she tried not to think about Andrea's revelation, the more she thought about it. She found herself replaying every conversation she had ever had with Stephen. Every joke, every compliment, every meaningful moment, searching for clues, searching for answers, searching for something she couldn't define. The problem was simple. The Stephen she knew didn't fit the story she had heard. Nothing about him felt calculated. Nothing about him felt dishonest. Nothing about him felt manipulative, which only made things more confusing. She missed him, even while pulling away from him, even while questioning him, even while protecting herself. She missed him, and that realization frightened her more than anything Andrea had told her. Because if she asked the question, everything could change. But if she never asked it, everything would change anyway. Several times she picked up her phone, several times she put it back down. What would she say? Were you looking for a wife or a solution? Am I Miss Right or Miss Help? The questions felt too important for a text, too dangerous for a casual conversation. The truth was becoming impossible to avoid. She cared, and because she cared, she needed clarity. But she wasn't ready to ask the question. Not yet. She needed to see him somewhere that mattered, somewhere that revealed character, somewhere she trusted, around family, around her mother. Mom June saw things Vanessa sometimes missed, not because she was perfect, because she knew people, because she knew Vanessa, because she knew what mattered. Vanessa stared at her phone, then finally pressed call. Across town, Stephen answered almost immediately. "Hey." His voice was warm, hopeful, and just nervous enough for Vanessa to notice. "Hey." A pause. Then Stephen laughed softly. "Well, this is already better." Vanessa smiled despite herself. "What is? You calling?" The smile remained. For the first time in days, the conversation felt familiar, comfortable. Stephen immediately noticed. So? Are we talking again?" Vanessa laughed. "Amazing." "What? You sound like a 12-year-old. A worried 12-year-old. That earned another laugh. Stephen smiled. There it was. The sound he had been missing. For a few moments, they simply talked. Nothing important. Work, traffic. A customer who had tested Stephen's patience. A meeting that should have been an email. ordinary things, but somehow neither wanted the conversation to end. Eventually, Stephen sighed dramatically. You know, what? I was starting to think you didn't like me anymore. Vanessa laughed. What? I'm serious. You are not. I absolutely am. No. Yes, she shook her head, even though he couldn't see it. You are ridiculous. So I've been told. The familiar phrase made both laugh. For the first time in days, the sound felt natural, easy, the kind of laughter that arrived before either of them had time to think. Stephen smiled despite himself. There is nothing funny about this. Oh, there absolutely is. What? The fact that you negotiate contracts, run a business, manage employees? Yes, but meeting my mother is where you draw the line. Stephen pointed at the phone even though she couldn't see him. Those things are predictable. Vanessa laughed. My mother isn't? Not even a little. That only made her laugh harder, and for the first time in days, both felt the distance beginning to disappear. My mom is very caring and maternal. Stephen listened carefully. She won't bite, I promise. Stephen laughed nervously. That's easy for you to say. Vanessa smiled. Stephen? What? She's meeting me for the first time. Silence. Then, ah! Vanessa immediately started laughing again. Wow. Another pause. Stephen, are you okay? Yes. Vanessa laughed harder. Are you sure? Absolutely. You don't sound sure. I am. Stephen. Okay, maybe a little. A little? Maybe more than a little. That earned another laugh. Stephen shook his head. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. I know how to deal with customers. Okay. I know how to negotiate contracts. Okay. I know how to handle difficult employees. Vanessa was already smiling. But meeting the woman who raised you? He paused. That feels different. The laughter softened. Not because it wasn't funny, because she understood. For the first time, Vanessa realized how seriously he was taking this. Not the lunch, her. A small smile appeared on her face. Stephen? Yeah. When is the meeting? Vanessa laughed. You mean where? See, I'm already nervous. She shook her head, even though he couldn't see it. Saturday? Okay. Around 2-ish. Stephen took a deep breath. Saturday, 2-ish. You're repeating it. I'm preparing myself. For lunch? For survival. Vanessa burst out laughing, and before either of them realized it, they were laughing together again. The easy kind, the familiar kind, the kind they had both missed. For a little while, the questions disappeared, the worries faded. Vanessa, Stephen said, I missed you. Something in Vanessa's chest shifted. I miss you too, don't be late. And the distance between them disappeared. Neither knew exactly what Saturday would bring. But for the first time in days, both were looking forward to it. End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9. It's time to meet my mom. Saturday arrived. Stephen Foster had faced difficult situations before. Business negotiations, unhappy customers, unexpected expenses, even a few questionable decisions involving New York traffic. None of them had prepared him for lunch with Vanessa's mother. He stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his collar for what felt like the 10th time. Everything suddenly looked wrong. The shirt, the shoes, the watch. Nothing seemed quite right. Stephen stared at his reflection, then sighed. You are a grown man. The reflection offered no encouragement. You own a business. Still nothing. You pay taxes. No response. Stephen shook his head. This is ridiculous. Unfortunately, it didn't feel ridiculous. It felt important, and that was the problem. Because somewhere between the baby shower, the entrepreneur meetup, the cafe, and 100 conversations in between, Vanessa Clark had become important, which meant today was important. And that made him nervous. Very nervous. Before leaving, Stephen called his mother in Jamaica. She answered on the second ring. Stephen? Hey, Mom. Immediately, she noticed something. What happened? Stephen laughed. Nothing happened. Mm-hmm. Mom, you only sound like that when something is happening. Stephen shook his head. Some things never changed. A few minutes later, he finally admitted the truth. I'm meeting someone's mother today. Silence. Then laughter. Loud laughter. Ah! Mom! So there is a girl. Stephen rubbed his forehead. Yes. His mother's laughter softened. What is her name? Vanessa. Tell me about her. Stephen smiled. There isn't much to tell. Stephen. What? There is always much to tell. He laughed. Is she a good-looking girl? Stephen sighed. Of course she is, Mom. His mother laughed. I'm just asking. Stephen leaned back in his chair. She's beautiful. Oh, dark complexion. Beautiful eyes. His mother smiled quietly on the other end of the line. And? Stephen paused. The next part came easier than he expected. Her personality makes me happy. The silence that followed felt different. His mother noticed it immediately. Ah! Mom! No, his mother laughed. I understand now. Understand what? Why I'm only hearing about her now. Stephen shook his head. It's not like that. Stephen! He smiled. Maybe it was exactly like that. She has a sweet spirit. His voice softened, very light, very positive. She brings a lot to the table. His mother listened carefully. Where is she from? St. Mary. Really? Yeah. She came here when she was young with her mother. Another pause followed. Then his mother asked quietly, And how am I only hearing about Vanessa now? Stephen laughed, then sighed. Honestly? I've just been absorbing the moment. His mother smiled. All forgiven. Stephen laughed, then her voice became gentler. Just remember to take it slow. Relationships take time to develop. Stephen looked out the window. A small smile appeared on his face. Too late. I know, Mom. Good. A moment later, he glanced at the clock. Hey, I have some friends coming by later. Do you need anything? No, son. His mother laughed softly. I am quite full up. Thanks for asking. Okay. Love you. Love you too, Stephen. After the call ended, Stephen sat quietly for a moment, then smiled. Because for the first time in a very long time, he found himself looking forward to the future. Across town, Vanessa was enjoying every second of his nervousness. The memory of Stephen trying to process the invitation still made her laugh. Mom June, however, was enjoying it even more. You're smiling. Vanessa looked up. What? That smile. What smile? The Stephen smile. Vanessa groaned. Oh no. Mom June laughed. Oh yes. The lunch began exactly as Vanessa had hoped, and then almost immediately started going off script. Mom June liked Stephen, not eventually, immediately. Within minutes they were talking comfortably. Within 30 minutes they were laughing. Within an hour, Vanessa felt completely outnumbered. Stephen answered questions honestly, talked about Jamaica, talked about family, talked about business, and talked about responsibility, never once trying to impress anyone. And somehow that impressed Mom June more than anything else. The questions Vanessa had intended to ask never found an opening. Every time she considered steering the conversation towards something serious, another laugh arrived, another story, another moment. Then came the moment that completely destroyed her plan. Stephen had just taken a sip of lemonade when Mom June looked directly at him. So, Vanessa immediately recognized that tone. Oh no. Mom June ignored her. Stephen. Yes, ma'am? Mom June smiled. Should I be looking for a dress? Stephen's eyes widened. The lemonade went down the wrong pipe. He immediately started coughing. Mom! Vanessa nearly jumped out of her chair. Stephen grabbed a napkin while trying unsuccessfully to recover. Mom June looked genuinely confused. What? Mother! What did I say? Stephen was still coughing. Mom June continued. This is the natural progression, is it not? Vanessa covered her face. Oh my God. You spend time together. Stephen looked trapped. You enjoy each other's company. Vanessa wanted the earth to open. You clearly like each other. Mom June smiled. And I want grandchildren. The table fell silent. Stephen finally managed to recover enough to speak. So at least 2 then? Mom June burst out laughing. Vanessa stared at both of them. Oh, this is unbelievable. Mom June pointed at her daughter. You got me all excited talking about him the other day. She thinks you created sliced bread. Mother! Stephen laughed, real laughter, the kind that came from feeling unexpectedly welcomed. Mom June smiled warmly. I like him. Vanessa dropped her forehead onto the table. Please stop. But secretly she was smiling. A short time later, Stephen excused himself and headed toward the restroom. As he washed his hands, he found himself staring into the mirror. For a moment, he simply smiled, trying to remember the last time he had felt this way. So happy, so hopeful, so content. The feeling surprised him. A few months ago, life had felt heavy, complicated. Now everything seemed brighter. Stephen shook his head and smiled, then quietly whispered, Thank you, Jesus. Meanwhile, back at the table, Vanessa looked at her mother. Mother, what? You were always telling me to behave. Mom June smiled. And? Oh my God, you were completely out of control. I most certainly was not. Vanessa dropped her forehead onto the table. Mom June immediately pointed. Child, sit up straight. Vanessa laughed despite herself and sat upright. Mom June folded her hands. You told me about this man. Vanessa groaned. Mother, now I've met him. She smiled. And I absolutely like him. Vanessa looked away. Mom June continued. He's charming. He's respectful. And most importantly, her voice softened. He has a clean heart. Vanessa became very still. Mom June continued. He seems honest, sincere. Am I right so far? For a moment, Vanessa couldn't answer, because hearing her mother describe Stephen that way did something to her, something important. For the first time in a week, the noise in her head became quieter. The questions were still there. The concerns were still there. But so was the truth. Everything her mother had said was exactly how she saw him. Honest, sincere, kind, real, and nothing fake, nothing suspicious, nothing forced. A small smile appeared on Vanessa's face, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to think about the man she was slowly falling in love with. Oh. Mom June immediately noticed. What? Nothing. What was that? Nothing, Mom. Mom June narrowed her eyes. Vanessa laughed. I just didn't expect you to accept him so fast. Mom June shrugged. Why not? Because... Vanessa stopped, because she wasn't entirely sure herself. Mom June leaned forward. Vanessa, what? Is there something you're not telling me? No. Are you sure? Yes. Mom June smiled mischievously. Do I need an FBI background check? Vanessa burst out laughing. No, Mother. You sure? Very sure. Mom June smiled. Good. Vanessa laughed again, but as the laughter faded, her thoughts returned. For the first time all week, she found herself questioning her fears instead of questioning Stephen. Still, the issue remained, and sooner or later it would have to be settled, one way or another. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10. The Decision. After lunch with Mom June, Vanessa drove home in silence. The radio was on. She couldn't remember a single song that played. Traffic moved around her. She barely noticed. Her thoughts remained trapped somewhere between Andrea's kitchen and the restaurant table. She parked outside her apartment and remained in the car long after the engine stopped. Thinking, reflecting, questioning, nothing made sense, and yet everything made sense. The question haunted her. Am I a means to an end, or the woman he wants to build a life with? If Stephen had been dishonest, this would be easy. If he had been manipulative, this would be easy. If he had been careless with her feelings, this would be easy. But he wasn't. Every memory argued in his favor. The way he listened, the way he spoke about family, the way he encouraged others, the way he treated people who had nothing to offer him, the way he had looked completely terrified when she invited him to meet her mother. None of it fit. Eventually, she climbed out of her car and headed upstairs. Her apartment felt unusually quiet. She kicked off her shoes and sat on the couch, then stared at nothing. Minutes passed, then an hour. The more she thought, the more exhausted she became. Finally, she stood and walked to the kitchen. A glass of water, a deep breath, still no answers. Only questions. One question more than any other. What did Stephen actually want? Not 6 months ago, not before they met, now. The distinction mattered. At some point, she found herself scrolling through old text messages. The first jokes, the first phone calls, the first invitations, the first conversations, small moments, meaningless moments, except they weren't meaningless anymore. Because now she understood something. If Stephen had married someone 6 months ago for papers, she wouldn't have cared, wouldn't have thought about it, wouldn't have lost a minute of sleep, because she wouldn't have known him, wouldn't have known his smile, wouldn't have known his heart, wouldn't have known the man. But now the idea bothered her, deeply. And that realization finally forced her to stop pretending. She cared. Not a little, not casually, not theoretically. She cared what happened to Stephen Foster. She cared what he thought of her. She cared what role she played in his life. And suddenly another realization appeared, one even more uncomfortable. She wasn't afraid of the answer. She was afraid of losing him. Vanessa closed her eyes. There it was. The truth. The thing she had been avoiding. The thing her mother had already seen. The thing Andrea suspected. The thing her friends would immediately recognize. She had fallen for him. Not dramatically, not overnight, slowly, conversation by conversation, laugh by laugh, phone call by phone call. The realization should have brought clarity. Instead, it created urgency. Because if she felt this way, she could not continue guessing. She needed the truth. The actual truth. Not Andrea's version and not her imagination. His. The thought settled over her with surprising calm. No more assumptions, no more theories, no more wondering. She would ask him, directly. And whatever answer he gave, she would deal with it, even if it hurt. Even if it changed everything. Vanessa looked at the clock. The evening was slipping away. She reached for her phone, then stopped. A nervous laugh escaped her. After all the confidence she had just built, she suddenly felt terrified. What if she didn't like the answer? What if she had misunderstood everything? What if Andrea had been right? What if she wasn't ready? Vanessa sat quietly, then shook her head. No. She was done running from the question, done avoiding it, done carrying it alone. She picked up the phone and pressed call, because one way or another, tonight she was going to get her answer. Chapter 11, Miss Right or Miss Help? Later that evening, Stephen was sitting in his living room watching the news when his phone rang. He glanced down. Vanessa. A smile immediately appeared. He answered without hesitation. Hey. Her voice came through softer than usual. Hey, Stephen. Something felt different. Not wrong, just different. He sat up slightly. You okay? A pause and then, can I come over? Stephen blinked. Now he was definitely paying attention. Now? Yes. Another pause. Is that okay? Stephen immediately stood. Of course. I'll be there in 10 minutes. The line disconnected. Stephen stared at the phone, confused, curious, and suddenly nervous. 10 minutes later, a knock sounded at the door. Stephen opened it immediately. Vanessa stood there, beautiful as always, but quieter, more serious. He stepped aside. Come in. Thanks. She entered slowly. The television continued playing softly in the background. Stephen reached for the remote. Vanessa beat him to it. She picked it up, muted the television, then placed the remote carefully on the coffee table. The room became completely silent. Stephen's stomach tightened. Whatever this was, it mattered. They sat down, a few feet apart, neither speaking immediately. Finally, Vanessa looked at him, directly, honestly, no hesitation. As tears filled her eyes, she did not want to cry. She hated crying, especially now, especially in front of him. Stephen saw the tears immediately and instinctively moved toward her. Vanessa lifted her hand, not harshly, not angrily, just enough to stop him. Stephen froze. Completely. The room seemed to narrow around them. For the first time since she arrived, he felt afraid. Not of the question, of the answer. Vanessa looked away for a moment, trying to regain control, trying to find the words she had rehearsed 100 times, the words she had promised herself would sound calm, reasonable, mature. Instead, they came out broken. "Stephen," her voice cracked. She swallowed hard, then tried again. "I don't know how to ask this." Stephen said nothing. He knew better. Vanessa laughed softly through her tears, a sad laugh, the kind people make when they're holding themselves together with determination alone. "I've been carrying this around for days." She looked at him again, and in that moment Stephen realized something. She wasn't angry, she was hurting. That realization hurt him far more than any accusation ever could. Vanessa took a breath, then another. Finally, she asked, "Am I Miss Right?" The words barely left her mouth. A tear slipped down her cheek. Before Stephen could answer, she finished. "Or am I Miss Help?" The room went completely still. For a moment, neither moved. They both had tears flowing now. Stephen was scared to death. This was not the way this was supposed to happen. And as he began to understand what was happening in real time, the weight of the moment settled over him. Stephen understood immediately. Andrea. The realization hit him like a truck. Andrea had told her, not everything, but enough. Vanessa saw the understanding appear on his face. Neither spoke. Several seconds passed. Then Stephen leaned back slowly. Not angry, not defensive, just disappointed. Not in Vanessa, in himself, because he had known this conversation would eventually come. He just never expected it to arrive like this. Finally, he nodded. "Andrea told you." Vanessa nodded. "Yes." Silence. Then Stephen surprised her. He didn't argue, didn't deny it, didn't dodge the question. Instead, he looked directly at her and said, 6 months ago, the answer would have been Miss Help." The honesty hurt, even though she had asked for it, even though she needed it. The words still landed hard. Stephen saw it immediately, which is why he didn't stop there. He leaned forward, his voice steady, calm, certain. "But 6 months ago, I didn't know you." The room became quiet again. Different this time. Vanessa listened. Every word mattered. Stephen continued. "My aunt had just passed. My mother was struggling. I felt helpless." He looked down briefly, then back up. "And yes, I wanted my citizenship. I wanted my mother here. I wanted a solution." The honesty was uncomfortable, but it was real, and Vanessa could feel the difference. Stephen wasn't trying to win, he was trying to tell the truth. Then he smiled sadly. "The problem is that life didn't follow the plan." Vanessa felt her chest tighten. "What happened?" Stephen laughed softly. "You happened." For a moment, neither moved, neither looked away. Stephen continued. "When Marcus introduced us, I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't evaluating you. I wasn't thinking about paperwork. I was thinking about how beautiful you were." Vanessa laughed unexpectedly through the emotion. Stephen smiled. "It's true." Then his expression softened. "But that changed." He shook his head. "The entrepreneur meetup. The cafe. The phone calls. Meeting your mother." He smiled again. "Getting interrogated by your friends." That earned another laugh. Then his voice became serious. "Somewhere along the way, you stopped being a solution." The room grew still. "You became the person I looked forward to talking to. The person I thought about. The person I missed. The person whose opinion mattered." Stephen swallowed, then finally said the thing he had been carrying for weeks. If citizenship disappeared tomorrow, if my papers showed up in the mail tomorrow, if none of that existed anymore, his eyes never left hers. I would still want you. Silence. Complete silence. The kind that changes lives. Vanessa felt tears gathering. Not because the answer was perfect, because it was honest, messy, human, real. Stephen wasn't pretending he had always been noble. He wasn't rewriting history. He wasn't trying to sound good. He was simply telling the truth. And somehow that mattered more. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Vanessa laughed so, heftily through her tears. You know, Stephen waited. I practiced this conversation about 20 times. That made him laugh. Only 20? At least. They both laughed, the tension finally breaking, finally releasing. Then Vanessa looked at him again, this time smiling, really smiling. And for the first time since Andrea's revelation, she felt something she hadn't felt in days. Peace, not certainty, peace, because now she knew. The question had been answered, not perfectly, but honestly, and honesty was enough. Stephen reached across the space between them, carefully, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. Their hands met and remained there, comfortable, certain, together. Outside, the city continued moving. Cars passed, people hurried home, life continued. Completely unaware that inside a small living room in Queens, two people had just changed the direction of their future. Neither knew exactly what would happen next. Marriage, children, citizenship, success, failure, joy, heartbreak, life. All of it remained unwritten. But for the first time since they met, one thing felt absolutely certain. Whatever came next, they would face it together. End of part 1.